Hi guys, Mr. Talbot here for you. So we're going to be finishing up our topic 4.1 notes here. We're looking at kind of the Industrial Revolution changing economic systems, and some of the terms we hear nowadays were kind of first originated back during this time period. So now I want to take notes over, but you are going to, on this first slide, but you are going to want to have your notes out and be looking at your study guide and those kind of things. Kind of a cool story as you're getting kind of situated here. We know from what we talked about last time with the child labor, with the dangerous conditions, the pollution, the tenements, the crime rate, the Industrial Revolution had a lot of challenges. And we're going to see some big society-wide changes that people are going to try. One that I think is kind of cool, and these were never at a large scale, these ideas of trying to create like little utopian socialist societies where like the factory owner would provide everything. And so like the Cadbury chocolate company in England, like built an entirely new village in England and put their factory there and built these houses and parks and everything for their factory workers. And it's still there today and kind of cool stuff. Would work at a small scale. We're going to see it gets a lot more complicated as we get towards the bigger level. So we're going to see how, going back to the age of exploration, these Western European countries are going to kind of leave mercantilism behind and they're going to move into a term called laissez-faire and into capitalism and free markets. And those are some terms you're going to be able to understand by the time we are done here. Looking at the final historical development, don't worry about that second one there. We're going to see how we get an increase in standard of living we already talked about. And that led to more and more goods. So again, that's how the economy has changed. We're really going to dig into capitalism and some of the responses to capitalism, or industrial capitalism as it is sometimes called. Um, those industrial capitalism is going to be the responses. We're going to see people pushing for reforms like in unions and in political parties. We're going to see socialism on the rise, and we're going to see communism on the rise, all in response to those challenges we hit on in our first video. So let's talk about capitalism. So the guy that's kind of credited with his name is Adam Smith. Don't need to know that. He wrote a book called Wealth of Nations. Don't need to know that. But his book is going to be kind of picked up and followed by a lot of these Western societies, and later this is going to spread to places like Japan and elsewhere. Um, he emphasizes a thing called laissez-faire, which translates to hands off. And it was basically the government should not be involved in the economy. Now, we're kind of used to this to some degree in the United States today. We are a capitalist country. Um, but back in, the days of the early United States and, certainly the colonial empires of Europe, this is a big change from mercantilism. Remember, mercantilism was the colonies served only to support the mother country. The mother country dictates everything about their economic life, who they can sell goods to, how much they can sell the goods to, who they have to buy stuff from. So that is very, very, very much hands on. Smith says you should have your hands off. Let individuals, let businesses, let these consumers make their decisions freely. Let them buy from wherever the heck they want to buy from. Let them sell to whoever the heck they want to sell to. This is going to lead to innovation. It's going to lead to hard work. It's going to be more efficient, way more efficient than the government can be. And this is going to grow the economy overall. And it certainly does compared to what was going on in mercantilism and really helps spark what goes on in the Industrial Revolution. Um, it's going to, and with that, all the positives of the increasing standard of living and all the challenges of the Industrial Revolution. And this is going to be what kind of leads to some of the pushes to reform. Something to think about is 1776 is a year as an American. You should probably, like a little bell should be going off. That's the year the United States signs the Declaration of Independence. So capitalism in the United States literally are kind of born in the same year. Um, but you want to think about who's in political power at this time. So this is a time period where still only the upper class kind of has political power. And the upper class is going to be the one that is the least affected by the challenge of the Industrial Revolution. The upper class isn't living in these tenements. They are living in their still kind of separate neighborhoods. They don't really ever see the urban poverty that comes with it. They're the factory owners. They're not the factory workers getting their hands cut off. So we're going to see reforms going to come from the lower working class against some of the stuff that was pushed with capitalism. So as these reforms are coming from the working class, voting power is going to be getting expanded a little bit, particularly early in the United States to some poor at this time, white farmers, and again, all male at this time, so women don't have the right to vote yet. Um, we're going to see the reforms to some of the lower middle class than working class in England. Now, the American government and the English government are going to be able to institute reforms, and there's somewhat major reforms, but they avoid a big radical revolution. They're able to do this for a few reasons. Both the United States and England still have a class of people below the working class that's going to be exploited. In England, it's their colonial subjects. In the United States, we still have this institution of slavery. So we're not going to see that radical revolutionary change, but we are going to see some limits on child labor. We are going to see safety standards put in place, and we are going to see an expansion of voting rights. A lot of this stuff was led by working class parties and labor unions. And the government power structure and the unions weren't always getting along. There was a lot of times there were strikes, there was violent putting down of the strikes, but they're able to put enough reforms in to kind of still maintain a very capitalist system. We're going to see in France, Russia, Germany, Mexico, socialism and communism are going to grow at bigger levels than they do in the United States and they do in England. So we've been kicking around this word socialism. You hear it a lot in the news nowadays, especially in an election year, and most people don't have a clue what it is. And that's not like because people are dumb. It's a confusing term, and the reason it's confusing is because socialism is a spectrum. That means there is a range of socialism, and it's all about how much government intervention in the economy there is. So a lot of people would say, hey, look, the early industrial revolution had a lot of these challenges, a lot of these problems. We need the government to set some rules because if we don't, we're going to keep polluting at an unsustainable rate. If we don't have some government regulation, workers are going to keep getting exploited. So we're going to need to have some rules on child labor. We're going to need to have some rules on pollution. We're going to need to have some safety standards. And with the exception of your hardcore libertarian, full-on farmer, most people agree that you need to have some level of government intervention. The debate on socialism gets to be how much socialism do you have? How much government intervention do you have? And there's not an exact line, okay, once you do this, you are officially socialist and you're no longer capitalist. So we're going to see kind of an arrow and see where the United States falls today. The more socialist you are, though, the higher taxes you tend to have, the more regulation you tend to have. And the goal of socialism is to lessen the divide between the rich and the poor. Capitalism is all about, rewarding innovation and hard work and those that invest their money well and build big businesses. They can be as rich as they want, and the free market shouldn't mean you have to do anything for the poor. So it's a very big divide. Socialism is not about getting rid of the divide. It's just trying to bring them closer together. So you're going to have, the rich people won't be as rich, the poor people won't be as poor. And again, the more socialism you have, the idea being you bring it closer together, but not even. If you go full on to where it's going to be completely equal, that is when you've hit communism. Or something's called the command economy. The only way to get to having everything equal in theory is to have the government make all of the choices. The government's going to choose who can be a farmer, going to choose who's going to be doctors, going to choose who can have a car, who can live wherever. Government makes all of these economic decisions. Whereas in capitalism, individuals and consumers are making choice. Communism, the government's making choice. Socialism, it's a blend. You still have private property, you still have consumers and individuals making decisions, but the socialists are going to have the government's going to own and control certain industries. Maybe it's the gas industry like we see in Mexico. Maybe it is healthcare like we see in some European countries. And socialism has varying levels of success. Sometimes it works really well. We see things like Denmark and Sweden. And then sometimes it's a complete disaster. We see places like Venezuela. Okay, communism does not have a mixed track record. Communism has always failed because that lack of innovation and response creates big issues. Now, the guy behind socialism and communism was named Karl Marx, and people think he was anti-capitalist. He really wasn't. He thought capitalism was a step in the right direction because it was moving away from feudalism, which is that traditional type of economy. Does not change with the times, and then we see the Industrial Revolution. We need to be changing with the times here. A command economy, like I said, it's all about government officials. We see this mainly in North Korea today. Even China, which calls itself a communist country, really has instituted more freedom, so they've moved more into the socialist range. The United States, England, a lot of individual choice and consumer decisions that guide everything, we'd say is more capitalist. Um, in the United States today, traditionally Republicans are more on the free market side, and Democrats go more towards having more government intervention. Not to say Republicans don't like government intervention, they just like a little bit less of it than Democrats do. In general, that's not true for every single politician. And you can kind of see in the world today, we'd say the United States is more towards the capitalist side, along with Japan and England. European countries, besides England, are going to be more towards that socialist side of it. And the only country that gets kind of close to communism today would be North Korea, which has one of the worst economies in the world. Um, would encourage you to kind of take some time and look through this slide on your own. So pause the video. Gives you kind of an idea of, again, these are hard terms, but, some of the debate over it. There's not a right or wrong answer because there's pros and cons of both these. And again, remembering socialism and government intervention is a spectrum. Hopefully this helps, guys. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Don't forget to fill out your study guide and do that check for understanding quiz.